Everyone knows about the butterfly effect. Everyone knows how the average time travel story works. Everyone knows how Steins Gate is probably going to go, if you have even the slightest knowledge of the science fiction genre. There shouldn't be any surprises. There shouldn't be as much to enjoy as there is. Yet Steins Gate is a visual novel that has aged like fine wine. Reading this visual novel after Chaos Head Noah and Chaos Child back to back, two other entries in Chiyomaru's science adventure series, made for a fascinating comparison. Those were stories with great ideas and some really thrilling moments, but also serious, ugly flaws that couldn't really be ignored. I entered into Steins Gate encouraged by what I'd seen from the writer Chiyomaru so far, and with only vague memories of the anime. I watched it when I was only just getting into anime manga, and therefore didn't remember much. That meant I got to experience this classic essentially blind. Something peculiar happened while reading it. I wasn't just sitting back in my seat, twiddling my thumbs, waiting for the story to end, like with so many other visual novels I've played. I wasn't complaining about the characters or the plot in my head. I was sat up. I was engaged. I was looking forward to what happened next. I was looking forward to booting up the visual novel. Steins Gate works for a curious set of reasons, some of which can't be wholly defined, but most of all, it succeeds because of this. It's just entertaining. And in the world of visual novels, where entertainment is sometimes harder to come by than you'd expect, that doesn't just make Steins Gate good, it makes it the gold standard. What I found even more interesting about this game is the thought of why it works so well not only as a piece of fiction, but as a piece of time travel fiction. What makes this story tick, pun intended, when most time travel narratives fall apart? That will be the subject of this video, and I'd like to emphasise that there will be spoilers and in-depth discussion of Steins Gate throughout. Please like, subscribe, and I hope you enjoy the video. It's rare for stories to exceed my expectations, especially when I go into a story with comparatively high expectations, as I did with Steins Gate. From recollection, Okabe was a decent main character in the show, but again, I watched the anime years ago. Decent undersells him by a mile. Okabe Rintaro is up there with the very best visual novel protagonists I've read so far, with Kageyaki and Muramasa and Michelle from Fata Moro. Not being a bland self-insert tool is a big part of this. Whoa, a personality, and not one that makes me want to put a gun to my head. Sure, Okabe is a bit of a loser otaku, but you never doubt that his heart is in the right place. His Chuny gimmick should probably descend into being overplayed, but somehow it remains funny, because the characters in the laboratory bounce off him so well. The audience progresses from laughing at him at first, to laughing with him later on. This mirrors Kurisu's experience, and one expects, everyone who ever came into contact with Hoenn Kyoma. Part of the reason why the science adventure series is so beloved, I think, is because of the standout quality of their leads. They all have character arcs, they all tie into the themes of the story. In the Chaos duology, often the point is to tear down the main character's worldview, to point out all the areas where he isn't likeable, such as with Takumi in Chaos Head. Okabe succeeds because he is likeable. He's not necessarily charming, but he is eventually heroic. It's harder than you might think to make a character that you're supposed to root for work without any irony, as it does here. It's a different approach to the Chaos duology, but Steins Gate makes it happen. It's not just that Okabe works in isolation. He works because his dynamic with all the other characters has been planned with care. The dialogue is consistent with its humour. Sometimes it's even witty. Jokes are repeated a lot, but the game does an excellent job of balancing them with the tone of the game. The tragedy and darkness of the narrative makes the jokes a release and a relief when they arrive, rather than an annoyance. It's a delicate balancing act in the tonal department, but Chiyomaru takes it all the way to the bank. Like so much of Steins Gate, it just works. The side characters are all great too. Daru provides consistent comedic relief. In Steins Gate Zero, they would take the pervert gimmick so far that it became annoying, in my opinion, but here it's not too excessive. Kurisu is a raging tsundere, yes, but her relationship with Okabe fizzles and cracks. They have real chemistry, real push and pull. They challenge and motivate each other. In addition, the backstory behind Okabe and Mayuri's childhood friendship is instantly emotive. I was not only invested in Okabe's relationship with both heroines, but found myself surprised at how quickly I got invested. The reason behind this, I feel, is the genius of the Kyoma persona. This starts off as a gag and then evolves into something with real dramatic weight. The backstory with Mayuri's grandmother paints the Kyoma persona with an emotional brush that never feels tired or hackneyed. When Akabe, or us, has to choose between one heroine or the other, it's not just a button press. It's a decision with real consequence. The emotional core of the game, the push and pull between Mayuri and Kurisu, the weight and significance of every choice, the butterfly effect in action, is superb. It's a love triangle, but not an annoying one, and that's hard to do. They all love each other. They all want to save each other. When they make their choices, or you force them to, there isn't a groan to be found. The choice feels significant, and in a time travel narrative, choices need to feel significant. If I had to criticize one thing here, it would be that Mayuri lacks agency. There are times when she feels like a mere object for Akabe's character development, just something for him to save. It doesn't help that a lot of her humour derives from, haha, Mayuri's stupid. I suspect that's why Kurisu's wit, intelligence, and ability to challenge Akabe stand out so much. It's a nitpick, but still true. At the end of the day, Mayuri serves her purpose in the story well. I was also surprised how effective Ruka was as a character. Their gender issues, yes, I'm just going to use they/them for safety purposes, are played for laughs at times, but the game still handles them with a fair amount of respect, and their relationship with Akabe again has serious payoff. Faris is probably the weakest link, as I'll discuss in my later section on the plot and ladder structure. She can be funny, but she can also be quite annoying, and I don't think her ending justifies its inclusion as much as the others. Then there's Suzuha. This character is as much a reason for the success of Steins Gate's emotional core as Kurisu and Mayuri. It doesn't even matter that the plot twists regarding her could be seen from a mile away and have the subtlety of a bar fight. Despite the obviousness of the emotional beats, they still managed to hit me. It's seriously impressive. So the characters are winners pretty much across the board. This is the biggest reason why Steins Gate itself is such a winner, in spite of whatever quibbles I have. On the other hand, there's the villains. I should emphasise that this isn't just a problem with Steins Gate. It's endemic to the whole science adventure series. The conspiracy theory element of Chiyomaru's work consistently sees his intrepid protagonists pitted up against the Illuminati, or CERN, or the organisation, or whatever you want to call it. And they're always, without fail, utterly incompetent. It's shocking how rubbish they are. Why can't they anticipate anything? Why can't they win despite their resources? Why do they get outwitted by, and this isn't an exaggeration, some teenagers with a microwave? Who knows? Does it really matter? Kind of, yeah. When the games introduce these shadowy organisations as real threats, it's a real disappointment when they end up being not much of a threat at all. It just makes them look silly. The games try to solve this by having individual characters embody the big bad in each game. Here in Steins Gate is Mr. Brown. Everyone has suspected their landlord as an evil bastard at times, and again, you can see this plot twist coming from a mile away. Still, the character itself in execution is really good. He's less a villain and more of a semi-villain anti-hero, but I was invested in his family struggles while still finding him appropriately menacing. Kudos to the section with his daughter. I loved this development, and as far as I can tell, it was cut from the anime. God knows why. Moika is good too, though the comedy of her earlier sections somewhat undersell the menace factor. Her reliance on Mr. Brown works well, however. Again, anyone who has read The Sound of Thunder by Bradbury, or literally any science fiction story ever, knows how time travel goes. You wonder how Akabe and Daru couldn't anticipate their own mistakes, given their apparent knowledge of pop culture. Still, when they make their mistakes, I didn't find myself cringing. This is because their reasons for making those mistakes derive from trying to save characters that Chiyomaru has ensured you're invested in. You can't blame them, even if you know it's going to go wrong. Some of the plot twists are painfully obvious, to the point where I did cringe a little. Suzuha might as well have a placard with the words "I am the time traveller John Titor" written on them. Beneath that, on the same placard, would be the words "I am Daru's daughter." On the other hand, the execution of the time travel is creative. The change to the Akihabara district is a satisfying, contemporary way of expressing the butterfly effect. Watching them send emails and mess with the timelines has a similar feel to watching cars align themselves for a crash. It's fun in a morbid sort of way. The D-mails and the microwave themselves are such a fun vessel for enacting time travel. It's so homemade and ridiculous that you can't help but laugh. The repeating tragedy of Akabe trying to save Mayuri is expected, but succeeds because of its setup. This is a relationship the writer gets you invested in, and seeing her die over and over again is as much of a downer as you'd expect. Furthermore, all the big final endings were very fulfilling, in my opinion. The CG of Kurisu bleeding in Akabe's arms drew an audible gasp out of me. Well played, Chiyomaru. This was another area where I was glad to have forgotten most of the anime, so I could experience it blind. Kyoma's solution for saving Kurisu and reaching Steins Gate, for saving both, is very in character and the setup is fair. I usually find it annoying when characters back out from killing characters, or bring characters back to life just for the sake of it. This might please certain readers who can't deal with the concept of consequences in storytelling, but what it really does is cheapen the initial death of the character and make it pointless. In Steins Gate, however, they set up the death of Kurisu right at the start, and establish that realities exist where she doesn't die. This means that, in attempting to reach Steins Gate, Chiyomaru isn't cheapening her initial death. He's just following the rules that have already been established, a point which I'll get to again later. It doesn't feel cheap when Kurisu is saved. It doesn't feel cheap when they reach Steins Gate. Not even a little bit. Are there any missteps in the plotting and structure? For the most part, the ladder structure acquits itself quite well, much better than in the Chaos duology. Most of the side routes' bad endings feel necessary. They all either expand on the plot or the themes of the story, with the possible exception of Faris' route. I'm a little torn on whether this criticism is justified. The Faris section is definitely less satisfying on an emotional level than the others, and I'm not sure it tells us anything about time travel or the characters that the others don't. This is the inevitable visual novel candidate for route that could have been cut and the story would have been better off. The most famous critique of Steins Gate appears to be that the opening is slow. I suspect this is a critique levied at the anime rather than the visual novel. I didn't think the opening was slow at all. The setup with finding Kurisu grabs hold of you straight away. It's a real hook. As a result, the slice of life sections have an undercurrent air of tension. You know the story is building towards something. You know that the slice of life has a point. On the whole, there's remarkably few sections where I questioned the plot or thought that there were major holes. Okay, fine. I will complain about this. Reading Steiner is total bullshit. This is another problem I have with the science adventure series in general, not just Steins Gate. Chiyomaru spends a lot of time bombarding you with technobabble that seeks to give a scientific explanation for the obviously pseudoscientific nonsense on screen. After that, without any shame, he'll say a character has a reading Steiner ability or a D-sword. If you're going to introduce fantasy, don't pretend it's science fiction. This makes the technobabble exposition sections really drag. I don't care how much scientific research Chiyomaru and his team clearly did for the story. Exposition is boring even if it's been researched. I would much rather the writing just accepted what's happening requires some suspension of disbelief and move on. For a time travel story, I'll once again emphasise that there were remarkably few sections that challenged my suspension of disbelief. The story follows its own rules for the most part, and that's the most important thing. That's not to say that things actually make sense. They don't. But you can pretend it does without much issue. The stuff that doesn't make sense isn't obnoxious enough to drag you out of the story, and the stuff that works, works. This is the biggest reason for me why Steins Gate succeeds, where other time travel stories fail. A lot of these narratives collapse like a black hole under the weight of the fact that time travel itself doesn't really make sense. Now, you can take a Doctor Who-esque approach and just kind of admit that this concept is full of logical contradictions, ride with it, make a few jokes, and hope the audience plays along.
Wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
Or you can establish rules as early as possible and stick to them. This is the approach that Chiyomaru takes. As long as you don't break your own rules, the audience is willing to suspend their disbelief, even for time travel. It's only when a writer starts breaking rules that problems arise. Nasu. Charm is a difficult quality to quantify. It's a strange alchemical mixture of factors that makes something charming. All you can say is that Steins Gate has it in spades. The biggest factor, I think, is the gorgeous retro 2000s art style by Hugh, and the moody bluish-grey backgrounds. You'd think these would date the visual novel, but no, these make it age shockingly well. It feels real and almost plausible while still feeling stylish. The character designs are slick and clear, the emotions well realised. I wish the science adventure series had stuck with Hugh for their other games. I just thought they brought so much personality to the story, and really made the art of the Chaos duology feel plain and generic in comparison. Takashi Arbo's soundtrack is another blessing. I've loved his music in every visual novel he's worked on that I've played, from here to Ever 17. It's always striking and evocative, setting the tone well. Here, the music is Clockwork inspired and very memorable indeed. I've mentioned the Faris ending. I've mentioned Mayuri's lack of agency. I've mentioned the technobabble. I've mentioned the convenience of reading Steiner. I've mentioned the villains. Is there anything else I don't like? To be honest, I'm struggling to think of anything else, and you can bet that's a compliment. Most visual novels I've read have so much wrong with them that my reviews end up sounding like a laundry list of complaints. Here, the complaints are there, but they impacted my enjoyment of the game so little that even mentioning them feels a bit harsh. The one thing I would say above all is that Steins Gate doesn't have anything new to say about time travel. If you've read The Sound of Thunder, then you've also read a good portion of Steins Gate. Then again, I don't think Chiyomaru is trying to say something new about time travel. I think his first and foremost concern is to tell an entertaining story, and with this visual novel, he and his team succeeded. Some stories try to make up for a lack of execution with original ideas. Here, Chiyomaru makes up for a lack of original ideas through sheer entertainment factor. He follows his own rules, he entertains the reader. And there's nothing more that we can ask for than that, even in something as fallible and hard to execute as a time travel story. Make no mistake, a VN that's well paced, well planned out, funny, tragic, bittersweet, satisfying, and sticks the landing? Yeah, Steins Gate belongs in a museum. It's that rare and that special.